My name's Dan Humberg, and I am with harvestfires.com. Um, this is an instructional video that's designed to help you with the tin enclosure aspects of a Firestop kit, in this case for the case model 8010 combine. It will also serve the earlier years of the 8120 up through the Model 10 year. In the Model 11 year, they changed the orientation of the turbocharger and exhaust pipe a little bit, and so there's a different kit, tin kit, and a different video for that one. What I'd like to do here is to just kind of step through the tin kit to show you the individual pieces of the tin. You can actually see the bends in them. It'd actually be a pretty good precursor to folding the tin. I have another video that shows actually doing that on the bench, but this might be helpful to watch this ahead of that. Also, if you're doing the install, this will help you understand the orientation of the pieces on the installation as well. So let's look at this. First, we're looking at the exhaust area of the engine. You're looking at the enclosure, but the exhaust system would run inside here, the exhaust manifold from left to right, back against the engine block, and the exhaust turbine right here in the middle. If I roll this down, now we'd be looking at the top of the engine being the engine head being back up here with the valve cover. Your exhaust manifold is oriented inside here from left to right, and then the exhaust turbine is right here and connected with a kind of a neck in between there. To the left here, not shown, is the compressor turbine. It compresses the fresh air. That air comes in this here and then exits. Let's see, I forget which direction it goes out to. Anyway, that component is here. So there's a bunch of stuff in the way here that doesn't show in this CAD diagram. The exhaust pipe leaves the exhaust turbine and goes in this one. It's mercifully the most clean exhaust system of any of the combines I work on. The pipe goes straight out here, makes an elbow and comes up and runs up into the muffler right at this location. So this is actually one of the easier systems to design for, and hopefully easier for you to do the installation on as well, although there's still some pieces that'll give you a bit of a headache. Let's look at the individual pieces. When doing an installation, I would probably start with the two pieces that run underneath the exhaust manifold. See if I can get it oriented so that we see those clearly, or not. There we go. This piece, and whenever I run the cursor over the piece, it shows the entire boundary of the piece, and you can see the flanges underneath when I do that. So this piece is going to fit underneath the exhaust manifold. It actually has tabs back here that you can kind of see. Some of those tabs in the prep of the tin were going to bend down. The CAD model doesn't show that, but it'll show it on the bench when you look at the video to show how to bend each individual piece of tin. Some of these will be bent down. Some of them will extend back the way they do straight the way they do now. The straight ones will lay on top of a casting boss, kind of like a bar that's cast into the entire block from one end to the other, so it'll rest on top of that. The ones you bend down will butt up against that casting boss, so it will locate those pieces of tin at where they meet the engine block. You can see here we've got a little tab with 4 screws that hold it on, or screw holes that hold it on to the other piece, and you may be able to put that on and put this piece in place with those two assembled, or it may not. It may be difficult. It's a lot more difficult to do than it would seem, because this space is a relatively tight space, but you may be able to reach underneath, or you should be able to reach underneath and put these screws in. You may have to do it by feel, but there should be pilot holes in the tin under here. It doesn't show the pilot holes on this one, but I think that I have the pilot holes in the computer model for these parts. So that should screw on there. If for some reason it is not, if I don't have those pilot holes in there, then what you would do would be place these pieces in place, then put this tab on here, and there'll be raised boss in the block sticking out here with an open threaded hole in it. It's an 8mm bolt hole, and so an 8mm bolt that I'll provide with the kit would thread into that. And so you could actually attach this tab and then fit it up against this piece above and mark through those holes with a Sharpie, and then pull the pieces off and punch those holes, or drill the screw. Actually, you could just use the drill and stuff, because those the screws are self-drilling, self-tapping screws. But you can't do it while it's on the machine. There just isn't room to work on it here, so you'd have to take it off and put those on. But I hope that those holes should be in there already when you get the pieces. Everything else, if you zoom in on one of these, you can see that there's an outer pilot hole and an inner pilot hole in the back piece. And that's my intention for all of the screws on these kits. So if we set this piece in place on top of the casting boss, and with the tabs that are bent down butted up against that casting boss, it pretty much locates it except for left and right a little bit. And if we take the matching piece to the right here, this one, kind of goldenrod colored brown one, and we also slide that one in place, these two will overlap here at this point. Normally I would probably have this shows the gold one underneath, and that will work. Usually I try to do it the other way around, where the blue one, the one up from this end, is on the bottom, because then it will shed dust. The radiator blast is coming left to right here, and it will shed dust across the one over the top of the other one. This one could catch a little dust under that tab. So if you have a choice, and if I may tell you that in the tin folding video as well, usually bend that tab on this one down a little bit and this one up slightly so they overlap, so that this brown one sits on top of the blue one. Anyway, you can screw those two together. It looks to me like at this point, like only one screw hole is going to match up, like this one here. The other one looks like it's going to be covered up by this tab later on, and that means you'd have a screw underneath this tab. So we'd put just one in here for now, but it'll hold those two together, and they'll be tied in with other things later on. Over at the right-hand end, if you get that piece in place, this one in place here, there is a bracket shown here that would also fold up, and then it has screw holes that will match the four on the bottom of this piece, so that you can put screws through there and put it on. This one you cannot assemble ahead of time. You can't assemble it to the brown piece ahead of time, because there's no way to get it snaked in place. You'll have to put it on the assembly, or put the two together once they're on the machine, or once this one's on the machine. So those are the pieces that I start with when I'm doing an installation. After that, you can put this blue piece that will be bent here and a little tab on the end there, and in place by laying it over the top here and putting screws through all these holes along here to tie it to the piece underneath. Some of these may be difficult to reach. They look like they'd be easy to reach here, but they're behind the air line that's entering the compressor turbine here, so that's a little tight. You may have to do it with the little stubby screwdriver that's provided with the kit. Once that one is in, and then you can see the shape of that piece with the outline there. Once that piece is in place, you can attach this gray piece, or it looks like perhaps we could do the blue one, the side piece here first. But these two pieces on the side are the ones that are going to split the exhaust turbine and the compressor turbine. And so we could start with this blue one. It's got a tab here that folds sideways, and another one that will wrap underneath here. And you can screw those together here if you can reach them. This is right behind the compressor turbine, and so those may be difficult to reach. Hopefully you can reach at least one of them to get a screw through there and tie them together. With that on there, we can put the gray piece, slip the gray piece, the other top divider there, slip that down over the top of the turbocharger bearing in here. I'm going to get this back center stage here so we can see it. Slip this one down over the top of the turbocharger bearing, which will be right in the center here. And then that piece can be screwed to the blue piece underneath. It shows 3 screw holes, one down here and one here and here. Those holes will be hard to reach from the left side, so the screw usually is put through from the right hand side, so it's actually going from the inside of the enclosure to the outside. And hopefully you can reach these 2 in the back with a long screwdriver from back in here. Anyway, we want to tie that top and bottom piece together. I'll also point out that this is the opening where your oil line that serves the turbocharger bearing will enter. That kind of angles in through this slot, and then it turns down over the bearing and is connected onto the bearing up there. You may have to, you'll have to split this apart and slip it over that line to get it in place, and you may need to adjust the size of this opening. I try to make it as close fitting as I can in the design, but um, but you may need to open that up a little bit. What I usually tell people is to try to bend the surface of this opening such that it is parallel to that oil line, so that it doesn't have a sharp edge up against the oil line. Instead, it would be the flat face. If you bent a little tab here out, that you'd have that flat part of that tab against the oil line, so that if it makes contact, it's not going to cut or rub a hole through that oil line. So make sure that you've got either clearance all the way around that oil line, or you've got these edges bent perpendicular to this face, so that they would not cause a potential friction point or uh, surface that could rub against that hard oil line. That oil line, I call it a hard line because it's made of steel, but it's soft steel. And the edges of this laser cut steel can be rather hard and abrasive. So you want to make sure you've got clearance there. Once you've test fit that and you got clearance, you can slip it down there and screw it on, like I said. Once it's screwed down, these screw holes over here should also line up. And so you should be able to put, looks like 3 screws, although this one may be behind the turbocharger compressor, may be difficult to reach. If you can get the top 2 in, that'll hold it on as well. So that'll give us the left side of the turbocharger exhaust turbine and separate that at the turbocharger bearing from the compressor turbine. At that point, we would come around to this side, and I would put this red piece up here, this red piece that will wrap around to the end of the enclosure around the exhaust manifold. And that piece you can put in place. You put screws through the bottom here, but don't put them in through this one yet, because we're gonna have another piece that overlays that. So this hole, this hole, this hole, this hole, and these around the end, you could put screws through to hold that to this bottom piece. Once that's in place, we can put on the 2 halves here of the wall again on the right side of the exhaust turbine. There, we can highlight that piece. That's what it looks like. You can see the tabs on it. Some of them are bent away and some of them are bent towards us here. This one's bent towards us, the other's away. That piece will slide up from the bottom, and you could screw it on here and here. Then the top piece up here, highlighted, will slide down over the top of the exhaust pipe. The exhaust pipe's going to go right through the center here. And over the edge of this, they'll overlap. And there's a place here for a screw. And there'll be one back in here as well, right here for a screw to tie those together. Also, looking over the top, we can now screw this tab onto the red piece here as well. Once we have those screwed in place, then let's see if we can get this oriented to see it. There's this long piece that will be bent to wrap around the turbocharger exhaust turbine. So you're going to bend that to shape. That's shown in the video where you're bending 10, but then slide it in from right to left, and it has to slide around the drain line that drains the turbocharger bearing back to the crankcase. So that's going to be right here. Now again, you may need to open this hole up. I've been told by somebody who had to do this on a recent one that they had to move that hole a little bit because it wasn't in the right place. They move those lines periodically, it seems, in the assembly process, and they don't change that note for anybody else. So it's hard for, I've designed it where on the ones, the machines that I've been on, if this line comes through somewhere else here, you may have to move this hole slightly or enlarge it to go around that. If you end up enlarging this hole to fit around that line, you may want to come back with some of the aluminum foil tape that we provide with the kit and close that hole in so that it doesn't provide too large a place for air to leak out around that drain line. You need clearance around the drain line like the other lines that penetrate the kit, but you don't want an excessive amount of clearance that we lose too much air in one location. So test fit this as many times as necessary to where you know you've got clearance around that drain line. And then once you've got it in there, or got clearance around it and these screw holes line up, you can put the screws in from the bottom or start here and work back that way. I guess you could do it either way. But once you get some of these screws in, the rest should line up. And you can put the screws in from the bottom and wrap the piece around and just keep following the pattern of screws around here. And each time you put another one in, the next one will line up. You can come all the way around to the top of the strip around here. And finally, put the last of those screws in place. Now it looks like at this point, maybe before we put that piece of that wrap around there, this top piece should go on, this big top long piece. And so you can put that one on. It will line up pretty easily on top of the left and right sides for the manifold cover. And you can put screws through around in here that will tie that top piece on. Once you have that one on, you can finish wrapping this piece around the turbocharger itself and screw it down here as well. Okay, with that, you've got the turbocharger and exhaust manifold boxed in. Then we just have the exhaust pipe to finish this up. And that exhaust pipe is boxed in with 4 additional pieces. The big dark blue piece here, if we bend it to shape, it'll slide up from the bottom and butt up against the wall at the outlet of the exhaust turbine here, and you can get screws started through and just follow around and put the screws in these tabs. You have to first find the right screw holes, but once you get it in place, they'll all line up and you can screw that piece on. Similarly then, the top piece, this gray piece, will slide down from the top. It will overlap the blue one as well as butt up here, and you can find the screw holes and get screws started in there and put all of those in. So we have the first piece of the exhaust pipe boxed in. Then we have 2 more pieces. One that will go on from the front. That's this piece. We can highlight that one. And it will slide on from the near side. And it has a cutout in the bottom of it because it has to fit around a support bracket that holds the exhaust pipe bolted down, bolted in place. So this will slip around that bracket, and the tabs should overlap here eventually, and you can use the force them into place and shoot screws through them to help fit that piece or make it be the right shape. And then when we've done that one in place, the one from the back, this blue piece, will slide over from the back, overlap the front one both on top and on the bottom. It also fits around a bracket through this slot down here. And once in place, you can shoot screws through here, here, and tie it to the gray piece up through here, and repeat that on the bottom through this tab and through these screw holes here. And at that point, you have the exhaust pipe boxed in. These tabs act kind of as a standoff to the exhaust pipe to keep this spaced away so that it's got space all around the exhaust pipe. And then if I recall correctly, in this machine, there's a muffler right outside here that runs perpendicular to this this line. So we're right up near the muffler, and by the time the exhaust gets to this point, it's probably cooled down to the point where it's not going to ignite dust anymore, at least we hope not. I don't believe the muffler itself gets so hot that it will ignite dust on contact, but the turbocharger will, and so that's what we're we're boxing that in so that we have a clean environment around there with clean filtered air. If you haven't already, then you can put these tabs on the bottom and you can tighten them in place, and that will hold the bottom part of the enclosure onto the block. The top has places for 2 or 3 bolts to hold these onto the block from the side. These, I believe, are 8mm bolts on these. On some of the later machines, they're 10mm bolts, but I think these are 8mm bolts that hold these on. Okay, so that's the individual pieces of tin for the 8010 and the early 8120 model combines from Case. And you can use this, play this back as necessary to look at the orientation as well as where the tabs, how the tabs are bent on individual pieces of tin in the kit. As I tell everybody in the process of these videos, well, this system will greatly reduce the number of smolders that you experience on a combine in a volatile crop like sunflowers or safflower or canola or even soybeans. I can't guarantee that you'll never have a fire on the machine. You can still have a fire that results from a spark thrown by a failing alternator, a hot bearing, some other electrical short, a friction point. But most producers that use this kit tell me that it pretty much shuts off the chronic smolders that they experience in those crops. So we wish you the best of luck. Tell you still to be vigilant on the machine for fires, and have a good safe harvest. Thank you.